So The Graduate, you see alienation from family. Easy Rider, you see this idea of alienation through what's the American dream and no longer holding the same values for some people and trying to find a new American dream. But also the third example I want to show is represented through the spirit of the age. What do we call that again? That's right, Zeitgeist. Is a movie that we're going to watch next week, Harold and Maude. Now, Harold and Maude, again, music guiding the film, launching the career of Cat Stevens, now known as Yusuf Islam, of course. But it's about a young man, Harold, who is fearful of change, absolutely obsessed with death, and alienates himself on purpose. He chooses to alienate himself as a protection mechanism, if you will, from everyone who gets close to him, and to create an escape for some feelings that he has, an escape for some animosity he has for his mother. You have this interesting, weird dynamic going on between him and his mom, and he uses death as a way of expressing himself. Okay, without giving away too much of the movie, death plays a central role. The movie challenges prevailing definitions of psychological normality, and it shows Harold constantly seeing a shrink, seeing a psychologist that represents the institution, represents the society's norms. And he also meets with a priest. He meets with a military officer who's a relative of his, an uncle. But he's meeting with all these parts of societal norms, trying to tell him how he should act. And the person that he meets and he gets to know most about life, that he moves away from this obsession from death and sees life as something beautiful, is from this lady named Maude. And he falls in love with Maude. He loves Maude, and she's an amazing woman. I love Maude. Some of the best lines in any movie, I think, come from what she's saying in a lot of cases. But the problem is, she's almost 70 years old, and he's like 20. So there's this interesting romance that happens between a 20-year-old and a 70-year-old. And then they play that in the movie, how that's disgusting, and some of you right now are going, ugh, that's exactly the point of the filmmakers, to show and turn that upside down on its head. Also the idea of death, the idea of suicide comes up throughout the whole film, and very real things, hard things to talk about, but this is where you see it for the first time really in movies, playing a central role, saying, hey, this is what happens in life. This is what people deal with. And let's put it on the screen. Let's have it so people can talk about it. Come out of the theater and be like, wow, that central part of that movie is this idea of suicide. What do you think of that? How does that work? And how do you have this sort of relationship between death and also life? And how do you balance that? So this movie is balancing death and life, balancing different ways of looking at sexuality, normal relationships thrown out the window. It's an interesting film, and music showing the central role of this whole thing. Alienation in a lot of different ways. So as you watch this movie, see how alienation works when you think about it. And how American values are being completely thrown on its head. And I'm excited. We'll talk about it more next week, but just to get some ideas going, alienation, Harold and Maude, I think it's a fascinating movie. You might be wanting to end it halfway through because it is so weird, and you're going to be uncomfortable, and that's the point. It's not something that you're supposed to feel comfortable with because it's against the norms so much that it makes people uncomfortable. So a lot to talk about. I choose this movie on purpose because it'll make discussion really interesting. There's a lot of stuff you can pull out of it. So think about that as you watch Harold and Maude.
If you want to sing out, sing out. And if you want to be free, be free. 'Cause there's a million things to be, you know that there are. And if you want to live high, live high. And if you want to live low, live low. 'Cause there's a million ways to go.